Hi everyone, welcome to the Hammer Museum. I'm Claudia Bester, I'm the Director of Public Programs, and I'm very pleased to welcome you. Throughout 2018, the Hammer Museum and the UCLA Sustainable LA Grand Challenge are exploring the technology, infrastructure, and ideas that can make Los Angeles the first entirely sustainable megacity in the United States. A very worthy goal. We're calling this series Future LA, Engineering a Sustainable Supercity. Every month we're doing a program focusing on one specific arena, such as building a sustainable energy grid, mobility and the future of transportation, new visions of the LA River, how humans and animals like mountain lions, coyotes, and birds can cohabitate, and what the built environment is going to look like. David Hochschild is our moderator tonight, and he'll start tonight's program by presenting a quick overview of the issues, and then our panelists will each give brief presentations here at the podium, and then they'll all sit down for a discussion with David, and then at the end we'll take audience questions. So tonight we're going to talk about how the city of Los Angeles can shift away from fossil fuels to achieve a clean energy future. We have a very experienced panel with us here tonight to help paint up the picture of what this will look like in real life. Richard Wirz is the director of the UCLA Energy Innovation Laboratory in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. He's an expert in large-scale energy generation and storage via solar, wind, and ocean sources. Professor Wirz recently led a study that examined the options for the Los Angeles region to be energy, water, and ecosystem sustainable by the year 2050. In addition to his work at UCLA, he's co-founder and chief scientist of Element 16 Technologies, a company specializing in large-scale energy storage. He's also the chief scientist for Windstream Technologies, a company specializing in distributed wind and solar. Then we'll hear from Nancy Sutley, the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, where she oversees the department's energy efficiency goals, environmental affairs, sustainability initiatives, and the electrification of transportation networks. Since she began in 2014, she's initiated the DWT's corporate sustainability programs, commissioned the DWP's headquarters as a LEED Gold facility, created many of the department's clean tech initiatives, developed and organized the DWP's climate change efforts, and ramped up the City of Los Angeles's electric vehicle programs. Prior to joining the Los Angeles DWP, she was the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, which played a central role in shepherding the Obama administration's signature environmental projects, and she was one of the chief architects of President Obama's 2013 Climate Action Plan. She's also served as Deputy Mayor for Energy and the Environment for the City of Los Angeles, a board member for the Metropolitan Water District, a member of the California State Water Resources Control Board, energy advisor for California Governor Gray Davis, Deputy Secretary for Policy and Intergovernmental Relations at the California Environmental Protection Agency, and she was Senior Policy Advisor for the U.S. EPA during the Clinton administration. And then our final speaker will be Angelina Galiteva. She's the founder and board chair of the Renewables 100 Policy Institute, an organization dedicated to accelerating the global transition to 100% renewable energy. Galiteva is an expert in strategic issues related to renewable energy, environmental efficiency, and overall sustainable policy programs for public and private entities. She's an attorney with a JD and a Master's of the Law degrees in International and Energy Law. In 2011, she was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to the California Independent Systems Operator Board, one of the largest energy transmission operators in the United States. Ms. Galiteva also serves as chairperson of the World Council for Renewable Energy and is a board member of the Global Clean Energy Desalination Alliance. In addition, she's a founder and principal of Neo Options, Inc., a renewable energy product and project development firm. Previously, she was the executive director of strategic planning for the City of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, overseeing the utility's renewable energy program. So now I'd like to bring David Hochschild up to the podium. He'll give us an overview of the subject matter, and then will serve as moderator for tonight's program. David Hochschild is a commissioner at the California Energy Commission. He was first involved in the solar energy field in 2001 in San Francisco when he served as a special assistant to Mayor Willie Brown. While in that position, he launched a citywide $100 million initiative to put solar panels on public buildings. He went on to co-found the Vote Solar Initiative, which is a 60,000-member advocacy organization promoting solar policies at the local, state, and federal level. He served as executive director of a national consortium of leading solar manufacturers and worked for 5 years at Solaria, a solar company in Silicon Valley. In 2007 to 2008, he served as a commissioner at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. So please join me in welcoming David Hochschild.
Well, thank you, Claudia, for that generous eulogy, and good to be with everyone tonight. Can we give a round of applause to the good folks at Hammer Museum for organizing this forum? So I'm just back from a renewable energy symposium in Israel in the Palestinian territories. I'm German Jewish on my father's side. It was my first time there, and while I was there, I heard a funny story. I went to Jerusalem and saw the Wailing Wall, and our guide told me a story that there's a old Jewish man praying at the Wailing Wall, and a reporter comes up to him and asks, so, how often do you come to pray here? And the man says, I come 3 times a day. The reporter says, well, what do you pray for? He says, in the morning I come to the wall and I pray that my children will have a better life than I've had. In the afternoon I come back to the wall and I pray for an end to all war and conflict around the world. In the evening I come back to the wall and I pray for the protection of the natural world and clean air and clean water. And the reporter says, well, how many years have you been coming here? The man says, 50 years. And the reporter says, well, what do you think the impact is of you doing all this prayer? And the guy goes, well, sometimes it feels like I'm talking to a wall. And, it can feel that way on the issue of climate. It can feel dismaying, but there's actually a lot of hope right here in Los Angeles and right here in California, and that's what we're going to focus on tonight. Our state is really a beacon of light right now. Leadership has shifted decisively to states like California, and one thing I think we should all be proud of is our identity as clean energy citizens. We have the largest wind project in the world is here in California. The largest geothermal project in the world is here in California. Largest solar thermal tower and solar thermal trough power plants, largest thin film solar PV project in the world, all here in California. Our largest manufacturing operation in the state of California is an electric car company, Tesla, right? So that's here. And we are really leading the way globally for the clean energy future that we're trying to build. And so we're going to get into all those issues today with our panel, but just to level set a little bit where we are as a state, the transition is happening very quickly. In 2008, we only had 12% renewable energy. Today, we're at 30%. And we don't count under our current law, we don't count large hydro. If you count large hydro, we're at 40% today, okay? And yes, that's where we're getting there. We're getting there. Remember what the critics said, though. When we started down this path, the Koch brothers and others said basically 3 disasters would befall our state if we went down this path of bold clean energy policy. Number 1, it was going to crash our economy. Number 2, it was going to raise unemployment. And number 3, the lights were going to go out, okay? Well, let's take stock. Where are we? Since 2000, California's GDP has grown by 40%. The other 49 states, 28%. Our economy is growing faster than the rest of the United States. Our unemployment rate has been cut by 2/3 in the last 6 years. We're at 4.2%, right? And the lights, we've had no rolling blackouts in the state since 2001, and those were caused by market manipulation from Enron. And in fact, renewables have helped secure the grid during the periods of threat, which have come from other sources like Aliso Canyon and the Songs nuclear plant going out. Renewables have actually been what's helped keep the lights on. So it's important to remember this mythology and to dispel it because they're still making the same arguments in other states and other nations around the world. And so we need to keep leading and keep pushing. And that's why I'm so proud to be here with this incredible panel to get into this. So to kick us off, I'd like to ask Richard Wirz from UCLA to come give his presentation. Please give him a warm welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start with this slide. And this slide is one world that you might not be familiar with. But this was, before I worked in renewable energy, I actually started working in renewable energy in '93. And back then, people used to ask me, what is renewable energy and why? Why do we care? And now that's not such a question. But during that time, I worked on wave and ocean energy. And then I came out to California in 2000 and joined Caltech and then NASA JPL. And so that was actually not renewable energy. What I started working on were these sexy little thrusters down here, and they're called electric propulsion devices. And they shoot hot gas out the back, or basically plasma out the back. But how is this germane to today's discussion? This is a power system. And think about this as a closed power system. This spacecraft, called the Dawn spacecraft, which actually was led by UCLA and operated by JPL NASA, actually has a few kilowatts of power. That sounds like a lot of power. So we have these giant solar arrays, and we're out at the asteroid belt. This is the largest object in the asteroid belt, called Ceres. It's a protoplanet. And so we are collecting over 3 kilowatts of power at these solar panels. We have batteries in here, and we have these thrusters we need to power, and the communication and the instruments. So this is a closed system. And so this is the kind of way we think about it. We have a system that needs power. We have users like the propulsion system, and we have batteries for storage. And that's very important for today's discussion. So now let's switch our focus to Spaceship Earth and look at this problem. And in particular, we're looking at a hotter and drier LA, and what are the challenges there? And so as part of the UCLA Grand Challenge, we have asked this question: what would it take to make UCLA the first major city that's 100% renewable energy, but also livable and also can meet its water requirements? So if I can advance the slide here. There we go. So this is the Grand Challenge led by Mark Gold. And the Sustainable Los Angeles Energy, Water, and Ecosystem by 2050 call is basically saying that we want the energy and we want the water, but we also want it to be a livable city. We want the human and the environmental ecosystem to be somewhere we want to live. So as the energy representative on the committee, I had to ask myself the question, can we do this? Is this feasible? As an engineer, you have to first think, is this actually something we can feasibly do? So that's the feasibility question. And then if so, what are the solutions? And then ultimately, what we're trying to do is by 2020, map out a plan for achieving those objectives. So I'm going to talk very briefly about that study. Where do I point this? There we go. Okay, so I talked about that spacecraft, and it's a kilowatt spacecraft. And again, some people say, kilowatt, wow, that's 1,000 watts. That's awesome. Well, no, that's not. That's basically what your home is consuming. Okay, so your home is consuming power on the scale of about that spacecraft. To solve LA's problem, we have to talk about tens of gigawatts. And a gigawatt is 1 billion watts. And that's 1 million of these. So we have a problem that is 6 orders of magnitude bigger, 1 million times bigger. And so we can't just buy batteries and buy a bunch of solar panels and make it all work. Those are expensive solutions that are good for certain applications and for very expensive equipment like a spacecraft, where we do put a lot of money into those pieces of equipment. So how do we solve it? Well, let's first look at the problem, or the challenge, I should say, maybe not problem. The challenge is that by 2050, we have to look at a low energy demand scenario. A lot of people will say, well, wait a second, well, what if I just insulate my house and I buy efficient refrigerators and I have an electric car, shouldn't I be fine? Even in the best scenario, by 2050, our low energy demand scenario looks like this. And if we kept power the same way it is, we basically would have 32% of, and remember, I was talking about gigawatts. We have about 10 gigawatts in electricity, a few gigawatts to move water around and purify it. We have about 10 for transportation. And then we have even more than that. This is kind of one of those things a lot of people don't think about. We talk about, oh, we just need to power the grid with renewables. No, we actually need to replace natural gas. Natural gas is not as easy to move around as electrons that we use for electricity, but it's quite easy. There's lots of pipelines all over the state of California and LA that basically lead us to a very heavy requirement for the energy that we get from natural gas for industrial processes and heating, and both residential and commercial. So what's the solution? Well, here's the very good news. So we see the challenge, but the very good news is that we live in California, and it's not just the Mediterranean climate, but it turns out that this map shows us our solar resources. And red in this case is good if you are a solar panel or a solar collector. And so what we have is, you see right here where we live in LA, that little yellow spot, that's where it's not too hot. But right around us, we have a lot of that red area that's perfect for absorbing solar energy. And the yellow spots are a little better for living. And so we live in this area, and we have kind of two solutions to us. We have a lot of renewable energy options, but as far as locally, now again, I'm talking about LA. I'm not talking about the entire country, even the entire state. But we really have the options of photovoltaics, so you might know them as solar panels that you can put on your house. You can also build these giant plants. Or you can have these solar towers that David was talking about, where we concentrate that solar energy onto a tower and use thermal energy. And we can also use troughs, and we have the biggest plants in the world in California already. So we have these two options available to us. And if you live in Southern California, you know that solar has to be a big player. So here we are. One thing that I learned doing this study was we have to bring the LA region in to collect all this solar energy. Doing it in LA alone is actually not going to work. A lot of people ask me, well, what if we just put solar panels on everyone's house and all the roofs, all the buildings, all the businesses? That would actually meet about 10% of the energy requirement. So we would require 10 times the number of roof areas that we already have, and we're not going to do that. So we need to build these plants that I was talking about earlier. Another thing I learned in this study was that this is what the LA region is, by definition. And it essentially is all of the counties that are nearly tangent except for Riverside County, which is also considered the LA region. So these solar resources, you can't see it so well here, but there's a lot of region that's highly compatible for photovoltaics and CSP. And also, one of the things people worry about is, well, wait a second, okay, you're not going to force us to put it on our houses necessarily, but what about these ecologically sensitive areas? We have a lot of area that's already been zoned that it's not ecologically sensitive, it's not federally protected, not vegetation or roads or people issues. So here is the solution when we look at it. We have major resources in solar, and we're looking, if we add this up, we have about 86% of our solution is in solar. We have geothermal, wind, and hydro can also play an important role. Now, some might say, well, we can get a lot from hydro, but a lot of that is actually coming from a megavolt line, DC line, that's coming down from the Columbia River to here. We're talking about locally sourcing our power here. So that comes to being solar. And now you might ask, why use concentrated solar versus PV? And that's the last thing I'm going to leave you with, is the idea that we need to store that energy, right? We use energy all day long and less at night, and the peak kind of comes right after the sun goes down. And our other speakers are going to talk about that, but it's storage that is the real challenge now. We know how to make the power, but we have to store it. Turns out that PV plants and wind and these rooftop solars require batteries, which are inherently expensive. However, concentrated solar power works on thermal energy. So instead of having an expensive battery, all you need to do is heat up a liquid and cool it down, and that actually is how you store your energy. So that's basically why, for cost-effective solutions, if we don't want to raise your energy rates in Los Angeles, this concentrated solar power is going to be a big player. And if you saw the recent Blade Runner movie, they actually accurately had that. They had a ton of these facilities in the desert, and so people are already thinking about that and aware of it. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Hi. Take my glasses off. I'm Nancy Sutley with the LA Department of Water and Power. And so I wanted to give you an idea of kind of where we are and some of the things that we're doing at LADWP around this question of 100% renewables. So I want to set the stage a little bit by telling you kind of where we've been and where we're going. So we've gotten a lot of interest from policymakers across the state, in Sacramento and here in Los Angeles, in having LADWP rely more on renewable energy. And the first goal was to get to 20% of our electricity coming from renewable sources by 2010. Met that goal. 33% by 2020. We're well on our way. The legislature in 2015 set the goal to get 50% of our energy from renewable sources by 2030. So on our way to do that. And the City of Los Angeles, the Sustainable City Plan, Mayor Garcetti's Sustainability Plan, has a number of goals related to renewable energy, towards local solar, rooftop solar, and other things that is helping to keep us on that course to increasingly rely on renewable energy to provide electricity to Angelinos. And in 2016, the LA City Council, along with the mayor, told DWP to enter into a research partnership to identify the steps necessary to get to 100% renewables. And I will talk a little bit more about how we're undertaking that research partnership. But that is well underway. And today in the state legislature in Sacramento, the legislature is considering a bill called SB 100, which would do two things. It would accelerate the renewable goal that's already established to the state from 50% to 60% renewables by 2030, and set a planning goal to get to 100% renewable energy by 2045. So that is still pending in the state legislature. So let's take a step back and say, well, you know, why does this matter? What's the point of doing all of this? And if we think about the sort of the three pillars of sustainability, environment, equity, and economy, if you look at renewables, there are certainly strong arguments in each of those areas that renewables provides huge benefits. So if we start the environment, clearly we're in a climate crisis, and we need to decarbonize our economy. And California's already set the goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the state by 40% versus 1990 levels by 2030, and 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions across the state by 2050. So renewables clearly help us to achieve that. If we look at sort of the equity pillar of sustainability, there is no argument that renewable energy is inherently cleaner than burning fossil fuels to produce electricity. And of course, fossil fuel combustion is a major source of air pollution here in the LA basin, and certainly in cities across the United States and around the globe. So there is that benefit. And then finally, if we look at the economy, clearly California and the LA region are benefiting from the jobs that are associated with renewable energy, solar jobs, and jobs in clean tech innovation that are helping to drive our economy forward. So where is LADWP in all of this? So in 2005, LADWP was at about 3% renewables. Not very much. Today, we are at about 30% renewables, again, on our way to 33% by 2020. The state's legislative goal is to get to 50% by 2030. Our projections are, if we stay on the current path, we'll get to 55% renewable energy by 2030 and 65% renewable energy by 2036. And this is all part of a historic transformation of the way that LADWP provides power to Angelina, something that LADWP has been doing for more than 100 years. And that transformation has a number of really important elements. One, we're getting rid of coal. So we will be completely out of coal, zero coal by 2025. We are making major investments in energy savings and energy efficiency programs, cutting-edge energy efficiency programs that help our customers save energy and save money. We are required by the state of California to, by no later than 2029, to stop using ocean water to cool our natural gas power plants along the coast. So we've repowered some of those plants and are looking at what the options are for those power plants that have not been repowered, about what the best way to approach that is. We're making major investments in charging infrastructure for electric vehicles and investing in energy storage and battery and other kinds of storage, and of course, renewables. And the result of all of these efforts is that by the end of 2016, LADWP has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by 42% versus the 1990 levels. So we've beaten that state goal, the 2030 goal, by 14 years. So that transformation is having a real impact. So to try to understand this direction, or try to respond to the direction from our council and our mayor to figure out what it would take to get to 100% renewables, we've undertaken a major study with the assistance of the National Renewable Energy Lab that's helping us to do the economic and reliability analysis. And I wanted to recognize in the audience one of our commissioners, Ara Vasquez, who's helping to lead that, and Eric Montag, the project manager. And as part of that study, we've got a stakeholder advisory group that's met a number of times. That's technical experts and researchers, representative of customers and local government agencies, and community groups and environmental groups are helping to advise LADWP on what's the best way to undertake this study to understand how we could get to 100% renewable energy. And there's a number of really important issues that we have to look at. Number one is, let's make sure we can keep the lights on. And we have run the system, the power system here in Los Angeles a certain way over many decades, and we've provided pretty good reliability to Angelinos, that the lights stay on. And so we have to understand really how these higher and higher levels of renewable energy, what impact it has on how we operate the system to assure that we can continue to deliver to Angelinos this very reliable power, even when the sun goes down or the wind stops blowing. We have to look at how not only how we get renewable energy into Los Angeles. So the map you just saw said, the LA basin itself is okay for solar, and that we still would need to bring in large-scale renewable energy from outside the basin. So we need to be able to get that power into the LA basin and then move it around the city. So we have to look at the impacts on our transmission system and on ensuring that we can do that. You heard also about what role energy storage can play. And then finally, looking at sort of what does this all cost, and how will this affect the rates that our customers, the people of Los Angeles, pay for electricity. So this study is underway. It's complicated. It might be four-dimensional chess or something like that, but it's important that we both get the input from Angelinos, from our stakeholder advisory group, but also to ensure that we're sort of thoroughly looking at all of these issues. And so this study will go on probably another year or year and a half until we're able to really focus on the results and be able to make a recommendation to policymakers. But I think it's fair to say that where we were just a little more than a decade ago, where we are currently, and where we are going, this is a radical transformation of a utility that has been part of the fabric of Los Angeles for more than a century. And we will be able to deliver to Angelinos clean, reliable, low-cost power for centuries to come. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Hey, 100% renewable energy. Give yourself a round of applause. You're here late into the evening to talk about 100% renewable energy, probably one of the most exciting topics that we can all be talking about, because we are all living through a massive transformation that's happening right now. And yes, renewable energy is important. The electricity sector is very important. That's the area that I work in. The transportation sector, key sector for California especially, because 40% of our greenhouse gases come from the transportation sector. So transitioning to electric vehicles, transitioning to hydrogen vehicles, and my God, transitioning to autonomous vehicles, because I was just in a fender bender coming here, would be such a great thing. And I would be so happy for it. That's why I was like, we should have had autonomous driving. But let's go back to the presentation. The world is moving in the direction of renewable energy, and we're not doing it only because we're concerned about the climate. Yes, we are. We're all signatories to the COP, except, of course, the United States and a couple of other nations who shall not be named. But we're going to transition to 100% renewable energy for economic reasons, because what we've seen over the last years is that solar and wind energy have become more cost-effective than their fossil counterparts. So this is the lowest cost energy going into the system worldwide. It's a transition that we're seeing, because now finally we have the benefit of saying going green is also green in both senses of the world. We see large penetrations of renewable energy. We're very proud here in California that we are pushing the 40%, as David mentioned, if you count hydro, but we're even higher because in the RPS on the electricity sector, we do not count rooftop solar. And rooftop solar in distributed generation is becoming a larger and larger percentage of our generation. Now, going to 50% renewable energy, even 60% renewable energy isn't such a big deal. It's when we start pushing 70, 80, 90, and 100 that we have to start thinking about how do we balance the system? How do we incorporate all of that renewable energy and make sure that we transition to 100% in a reliable and a resilient fashion? And we've got many friends around the world who are experiencing going to 60, 70, 80% renewable energy on any given day. Even here in California, we've had a few days where we've operated at about 70% renewable energy on the grid, just because we had one of those wonderful spring days where we had a lot of solar and not large demand. So yeah, we can balance the grid. It's okay. I remember when I was at DWP and when I was at the New York Power Authority and we were starting to work on renewables, and they'd say 10% on the grid. Oh, that's going to destabilize everything. 20% on the grid. Oh no, Armageddon. 30% in the grid. We're going to have massive failures. And then the ISO and other entities that started operating the grid came on and said, oh no, we can operate it because look at the tendencies that are happening worldwide. Coal is dead. If you want to, basically lose money, invest in coal. It's natural gas, not so much anymore, but very, very quickly displaced by renewable energy. And we're seeing that happen in the United States, so yay. We want our kids, wearing sunglasses and looking at the sunshine and not going into mines where they can get black lung disease unless it's needed. So there are many policy drivers that we have in the state too. Lots of people say, well, stop talking about 100% from time to time because 100% is just unrealistic. You don't sound like you're on the cutting edge, you sound like you're on the bleeding edge. Well, no, it is very realistic because as Nancy mentioned, we've got SB 32. If we're going to be going to 40% below 1990 levels in greenhouse gas emissions, then guess what? It's 100% renewable energy all the way. The issue is how do we do it in the most reliable, most resilient, and most optimized fashion so that we're smart about it. We don't need to spend a ton of money unless we have to. But California, and thanks to people like David at the Energy Commission, is able to have several policies that work together on energy efficiency, on renewable energy, on zero net energy homes, which is a new construction, which is very key. Starting in 2020, all new construction for residential is zero net energy, 2025 commercial, 2030 industrial. We're going to see power generation become a part of the building factor, which is very important. Transportation, my favorite topic tonight, transitioning to zero emission vehicles as well. And of course, the greenhouse gas goals. We've been able to put a lot of renewables on the grid, and as was mentioned before, renewables are intermittent. Renewables are unreliable. Yeah, they're intermittent, but guess what? They're highly predictable. The sun is going to shine. The wind is going to blow. We know that if we can capture just 2 minutes of the solar radiation that hits the world every day, we can power the whole globe, including the billions of people who have no electricity for a year. So yeah, it's not a niche application, it is the application. The issue is, how do we capture it and how do we store it in the best possible way? What we've seen in terms of the growth of renewables on the California grid in the last 5 years, we've been able to integrate 20,000 megawatts of renewables. We've been able to do it seamlessly. Environmental issues have been there, but they haven't been as critical as they would with fossil power plants. And we've been able to do it very quickly and reliably. And 20,000 megawatts, that's the equivalent of 3 or 4 nuclear power plants. Does anybody here think that we would have been able to build 4 or 5 nuclear power plants in that time frame in California? And it's distributed reliable energy. Again, the myth that the grid somehow is disadvantaged because of renewables is completely false. What we are seeing is that countries and states with more renewables on the grid are much more resilient, much more flexible, much more able to withstand natural cataclysms or any kind of disasters, and much more able to implement new technologies on an accelerated fashion. So if we count the rooftop solar and the hydro plus the RPS for renewables in California today, we're pushing 50%, which is something we should all be really proud of. And you know what? Getting to 60, 70, 80, and 100 is not going to be such a big deal. There's some operational challenges that we do see on the grid. Yes, it's true, but that's also opportunities. Where you see the belly of the duck, that's overgeneration of solar. We have cheap solar in the middle of the day. That is not a problem, that is good news. All we need to do is find sinks for it. Do we have more regional integration where we can push the solar to other states? Do we have more storage that we can charge? Do we have more electric vehicles? Do we have facilities that are making hydrogen so that we can power hydrogen cars and burn hydrogen in the pipelines instead of natural gas, displacing the problem with Aliso Canyon? There's so many things we can do because we have cheap, reliable, emission-free power in the middle of the day. Renewables also don't use water so that we don't put additional pressure on the environment by using freshwater resources, because I don't know if many people know, but the largest single use of freshwater resources after agriculture on a global scale is the fossil industry. So if you have fossil fuel, you also have water problems, and look what's happening to Cape Town. They're running out of water, and they're thinking about putting fossil power on the grid, which is really strange. And then we have those steep ramps at the end of the day when solar goes down, which again, storage, innovation. We've got the high-tech community here in California. We can handle these issues. It's a technical solution. And technology and the drivers are what are going to drive everything. So there's huge opportunities with 100% renewable energy for storage, resiliency, and renewables in all sectors: fuel, transportation, electricity. We need to decarbonize the bulk grid. We're doing that. We need to decentralize. We're doing that with all the distributed generation and microgrids. It's happening. We're electrifying all of the sectors. We're enabling all of the customers who are now not only consumers but prosumers, because they can participate in the grid to monetize their participation on the grid. And then we need to regionalize in order to be able to have a larger footprint where we can send energy back and forth so we can all collaborate. It's a vision that can be done. Even the ISO will tell you today, 100% is possible. We just need to work together to have the programs in place, anticipate what operationally may become a challenge, move forward and just do it. It's not an issue that we need to study to death. It's an issue where we need to step up and just get it done. So, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a few questions of our panel, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. My request is when you do get called on for a question, make sure you have a microphone. There are people who will be distributing those. Introduce yourself and speak clearly in the microphone. This is being recorded. So last week, Governor Brown did something really bold. He set a new state goal to get to 5 million zero-emission vehicles by 2030. Okay, we're at about 370,000 electric vehicles today on the road. And Angelina, you just mentioned this solar overgeneration that's occurring during the middle of the day. And what we kind of need is a electric vehicle happy hour where they're all plugged in and charging at the same time. How do you see that rolling out in Los Angeles? And what are the barriers to getting more of these vehicles on the road here? Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a statewide challenge and a statewide opportunity. One of the issues is charging infrastructure. The beauty of electric vehicles is you can charge them anywhere. You can charge them in your garage, or you can fast charge them anywhere that there's a fast charging station. What we as grid operators worry is there's going to be all these fast chargers where you zap your cars, and they're all going to do it when you have the head of the duck where we have grid constraints, and that's going to put additional issues on the grid and problems on the grid. But again, we can work together with the utilities to insulate that. You can put storage at the charging stations. You can send price signals to the customers charging their cars saying, hey, if you charge during this time frame, you're charging for free, or we'll pay you to take the power. But if you're charging when it's constrained, it's going to cost you a whole lot more. So those economic signals might be able to alleviate some of the issue. And I think working with utilities together to reduce the first cost of the car. If you reduce the first cost of the car, which is what some CCAs are doing, and you bring it down to, let's say, $10,000 for a brand new car, and then if you follow grid signals, you're able to monetize the grid signals on a monthly basis so your car can make you money along the way as well. I think if that becomes a reality, everybody is going to want to have, if not the first car be electric, the second car be electric, and it's going to be a zero cost or a money plus asset for them as opposed to a liability. So why not? So having a low-cost car, having the charging stations, having the grid signals able to monetize the car, having the ability to make sure that you can drive that car without it being a burden, and have the cars available for sale, together with programs from the utilities lowering the cost of operation and ownership, is what's going to open the doors to 5 million, 10 million cars, and maybe more, because we do need them.
Nancy, you were an advisor to Governor Gray Davis during the energy crisis, and were hip deep in all the challenges the state was going through at that time. Obviously, when things go wrong in energy, it can have political repercussions, and governors can change and so forth. When you look ahead at the challenges of getting to 100%, what concerns you the most? What are the biggest barriers, and how do we overcome them?
Well, I think the lesson I took away from the energy crisis was that if you make a small error over billions of kilowatt hours a year, that's a lot of money. And during the energy crisis, I think I saw one estimate was $1 trillion left California and went somewhere else. So I think that it's then really incumbent on the both the market regulators and the grid regulators to get it right. And so I know the ISO has its hands full trying to figure that out. So I think that there are things that are going on currently in the electricity markets that are getting us to a sort of a market that can help to solve some of the technical challenges, getting the technology to help us to solve some of those technical challenges, and that we're going to try some stuff and hopefully it'll all work. But just be careful that we don't go too far down a road without knowing what the consequences are. So, for one example, LADWP is joining something called the electricity imbalance market, which is a way, as Angelina showed in her slides, there are going to be times of the day, there'll be times of the year where utilities in California, including LADWP, will have a lot of solar generation, more than we can consume here in Los Angeles, and utilities in other parts of California or in other states in the Southwest will be looking for electricity. So this market that is developing will provide some opportunities to exchange power, to buy and sell power with other utilities that will help to deal with that. And so that's a good first step. And it's great that to let's see how it goes. Let's see how the transaction goes, and see how we can expand in that market, and whether it solves some of both the technical and market challenges that we know we have to get to as things like our storage technology gets better and better and cheaper and cheaper and can be deployed at large scale.
Well, building on that point, Richard, you've been involved in a lot of innovation and innovative companies, and I think have won some grants from the California Energy Commission. What additional innovation do you think we need to get to 100%, or do we have everything that we need and we just need to deploy it?
I think that it really is promising that we actually have a lot of the technology that we need. I think that the challenge is that we have those technologies, but they're not cost effective yet. The large scale solar energy, if we just look at the cost of PV right now and we don't worry about storage, then we say, oh, it's grid parity, or we're even better than coal. And wind is a good example where people usually use that as an example of a technology that is cheaper than coal. But the problem is that if you do need to store that power, then you have those challenges. And then also with the CSP, with the concentrated solar power, we have these giant plants, but we need to get that down. And the DOE and the CEC have both pioneered programs to bring those costs down. And the costs come from just the cost of the facility, so just the cost of the essentially raw materials, and also the cost of the storage. So those are really the two places we need to have innovations, but we can power forward right now and start installing things now. And then as we get closer and closer to 100%, then we need to start more innovation, and that would be primarily in storage.
I'll ask one more question to the panel, and then we'll open it up to the audience. If you think about what's going on now, we are shifting energy eras, and for much of the last 150 years, really, we were in the coal era, and coal actually played an incredible, decisive role in world history. It powered, the British Empire to become the force that it did. Coal was actually decisive in the outcome of the U.S. Civil War. The North had a big coal advantage. Coal obviously powered Germany to fight and wage 2 world wars, and powered our economy for a long time. And only 6 years ago, it was 52% of our electric portfolio was coal. Now it's less than 30 and falling rapidly, no matter what Trump says. Now, gas has been actually displacing coal, and it is a very significant part of our portfolio. What is the future that you see for natural gas? And this is for anyone.
One thing, I've actually worked a lot with SoCalGas on this, and they have a program trying to green the pipeline. So as I was talking about, it is easy to move the electrons around, and for high density applications, industrial applications, actually sometimes electric power can be very difficult because you don't have the energy density. You have these really high temperature, high energy situations, manufacturing, construction, excavation, where you need high density power. And actually gas is really good for that. So the idea is getting away from natural gas and using, say, carbon neutral biofuels or solar fuels. You can actually address that. And so the idea of greening the pipeline is the idea of we already have this network of gas pipelines all over California, and instead of feeding natural gas, we can feed carbon neutral gas.
Great. Go ahead.
I agree with that as well. We're seeing it happen in Europe as also, where the gas grid interconnects all of Europe, and you can connect the windmills in northern Germany with the solar plants in southern Italy, and move the power and be able to store it into the pipelines as well. That can happen right now. We actually have a project at UC Irvine that all of us saw last year, where they're making hydrogen with solar power and putting the hydrogen directly into a cogen plant and cleaning up the gas grid immediately by up to 12%. That's happening in Europe too. They're able to put in, they said, anywhere between 12 to 15% of hydrogen into the natural gas pipelines. They make the fuel more efficient, they clean it up, and you can then, as a next step, completely clean that fuel if you take a synthesis process and you take carbon either from the atmosphere or those heavy industries, crack them together, and you can make renewable gas or solar gas or however you want to refer to it, but it can displace the gas 100%. So imagine if we had that in Aliso Canyon. Then we wouldn't care if we had a leak. We wouldn't care if we had a leak, because it wouldn't be wiping away the greenhouse gas benefits that we've had for the last year or so from energy efficiency. So gas is a fuel that I see as a transition fuel to natural gas. And as we clean up the pipeline, it certainly has a place into the 100% renewable energy mix, but it needs to be greened and it needs to be cleaner. And that's a technology that is promising and becoming more and more cost effective every day.
All right, well, let's open up to the audience. I believe there's someone with microphones here. Maybe not. Is that a microphone in the back? Yeah, so just wait until you get the microphone to ask your question. Once you go ahead, this woman right there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lane Semper. Sorry, this is too loud. I'm a trained climate reality leader, the Honorable Al Gore, and I'm also a very proactive community leader in trying to shut down Aliso Canyon. So thank you very much for mentioning that. I participated in every single hearing, even their criminal trial. And this is off subject, but lately I've noticed so many of these waste management trucks driving around. They're big, they're green, they're saying think green, clean energy. It is duping the public. I saw one in Solvang, they're all over the Valley, Los Angeles, and also calling it natural gas. Those two things really dupe the public. It makes it feel like it's safe. Is there anything that's being done about this? Or can we do to...
I think the best thing to do is just keep powering forward, doing 100% renewable energy, no matter what name you give it, no matter what words are on the sides of trucks. I mean, if California leads the way and says these things have to be done, no matter what your company says or what words you express, then we should be fine.
I was going to add, I think one of the glide paths to get to electric vehicles actually is what's happening now with electric buses. It's really exciting. Just last year alone, 2 new companies opened manufacturing facilities in California, BYD and Proterra, making electric buses. They got sales in 40 states. They're scaling, and actually the value proposition for electric buses is even better than for electric cars, because it's a big saving on the brake pads and maintenance. It's about $50,000 a year of savings versus a conventional bus. I think when you see the bus sector really grow, it will actually spill over into other heavy goods movement type vehicles and garbage trucks as well. Other questions? Yeah, you here, ma'am. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll get you there.
Thank you so much. My name's Mila Reason, and I have a question. It's my understanding that I actually have a two-part question, that LADWP and the City of Los Angeles have a sizable capital investment in the Palo Verde nuclear power plant in Arizona. And as a partner with the Southern California Public Power Association, have created instruments to build the transmission lines and to actually build the plant. The plant evaporates 27,000 gallons of water every minute in order to cool those reactors, and it produces more high-level radioactive waste than any other nuclear plant this side of the Mississippi. I would like to know why the LADWP and the City of Los Angeles is not moving quickly to stop this, what I consider to be very irresponsible participation in this project, because we simply don't know what to do with this radioactive waste. And we're depleting the water table and the aquifer in Arizona dramatically.
Thank you. Nancy?
So we get about just about 5% of our electricity from Palo Verde. It's an investment that DWP made, I think, 30 or plus years ago. Yeah, so it's and it's licensed through 2047. So it's something that if the policymakers say divest, then we'll divest. But right now, I wouldn't say it's a major capital investment. It was an investment made in 1980. We have a contract, and it provides us about 5% of our power.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, everyone. Hi, good evening. I'm Aura Vasquez. I'm one of the commissioners for the Department of Water and Power here in Los Angeles. And I'd like to ask the panel, and ask some folks here also from DWP that came to listen to the conversation, trying to figure out how we can make renewables more accessible for low-income folks. And in a moment in history where low income has become a dirty word, literally in utilities, because of different policies like Prop 26 and other issues, I am personally alarmed that a lot of us that, for example, rent or don't have the infrastructure to really host renewables can really enjoy renewables. People like just south from here that don't per se have the right rooftop and they cannot possibly hold a PV system. It's a real challenge because the majority, even the development as LA keeps building new housing, it's not gonna be homes. It's gonna be multifamily and it's gonna be buildings, and this is gonna really require all of us to think about how we're gonna bring renewables to Los Angeles in a different way. So this is a topic that keeps me up at night. I think Nancy and I have spoken about this many times, in which I really want to see renewables done in an equitable way, and in a way that also has the infrastructure of changing a whole grid where we all here pay for, view and done in a different way. So please help me understand this. Please also help folks here in the audience also learn a little more about this topic.
So thank you, and thank you for your service on the commission. It's incredibly important, I think, for all Angelinos that, remember that DWP is your utility. It belongs to anybody who lives here in the city of Los Angeles. And if you care about what DWP is doing, if you're interested, then there are commissioners, there are meetings that are open to the public. We try to get out in the community as much as possible, but we are your utility. It's a really important subject, and as you know, and as some of you may know, one thing that we've been doing over the last couple of years, led by our commission, is to really try to understand how DWP affects all parts of Los Angeles, all Angelinos. So we've been trying to really take a look at a number of our programs through an equity lens to make sure that that we're able to respond to the needs of all Angelinos, no matter their income, no matter where they live. And so we've been engaged in something called the Equity Data Metrics Initiative. Very exciting title, but really is just making sure that we're being very intentional and deliberate and understanding how, when decisions are made about how to spend money, are we delivering power reliably, or delivering water safely and reliably to every Angelino. So that's been a very important thing to help us to understand sort of how we're able to, to provide these essential services to all Angelinos. And when it comes to solar, we have sort of 3 sets of programs. One is we still offer an incentive payment, a solar incentive payment for people who install solar panels. We have some funding for that. It may run out soon, but we do still have some funding. We have a feed-in tariff program where we essentially contract for the output of solar projects built here in the city. And then we are in the midst of developing a community solar program to try to directly address some of the issues that Commissioner Vasquez raised. And then one last thing I would just mention is that, we try to ensure that we're addressing the needs of low-income Angelinos. We provide rate discounts for low-income Angelinos, and we have a number of different programs, but one thing we've done is we've done energy efficiency upgrades in public housing. We've done about 13,000 units over the last year or so. So we're trying to address the needs, make sure that we're addressing the needs of all Angelinos.
Just to add to that, I think the goal is you want to make it easy for people to do the right thing. Easy for people to do the right thing. And, I think community solar is the most exciting of those options because, it costs about $3 a watt to do a residential system, about $2 a watt to do a commercial system, and utility scale is going in for $1 a watt. And if you have a system where someone who's a renter can buy a share of a larger system going at $1 a watt, it's much more affordable. We had a question right here in front.
Hi, thank you very much. David, say hi to your dad. He's one of the great historians in American history. Adam Hochschild is his father. He's a fabulous writer. My name is Harvey Wasserman. I have the KPFK show California Solartopia, which will be on tomorrow night at 6:30. It's on every Thursday night. If you're an activist and you want to be on the show, please see me. After, I'll give you my card. My co-host, Mara, asked that question of Palo Verde. Very quickly, we hope we're on the brink of shutting Diablo Canyon. And I'd like to know what you guys think how that's going to impact. It's supposed to close in 2024 and 25, but the CPUC has just turned down this ridiculous rate hike for PG&E. We think we can shut Diablo Canyon earlier, and we want to know how that's going to impact the picture in California. And I also want to know, I just moved here from Ohio where it's 32 degrees. I have a house in Valley Village. I've had the solar people out, and they're telling me that the DWP will limit the amount of solar I can put on my house to the amount of electricity I use. I will not do that. You can come arrest my house. I am going to put 100% capacity on my house, and I want to know why the DWP wants to limit me. So it's 90.7 FM. You'll hear the answer on that tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, who would like to take that?
So I guess there's 2-part question. So the first question is Diablo Canyon and will it affect and how it will affect if it were to be closed down. Diablo Canyon is not like San Onofre. San Onofre was in a constrained load pocket, so when San Onofre went offline, that caused a lot of reliability concerns for all of us. And remember, during the time that it was shut down, we were also in a drought, so we had a low hydro year. And we were all scrambling, working together with CAISO, CEC, ARB, everybody making sure that we brought in enough energy and resources to be able to replace 2,200 megawatts of what was supposed to be a very reliable behemoth that just went out overnight. So the myth about fossil fuel being reliable, when you have a big cataclysm of 2,000 megawatts going offline in a constrained area, just like San Onofre or like Aliso Canyon, that's a problem. A much more distributed, much more reliable, much more autonomous yet integrated system gives us the flexibility and the ability to be able to absorb resources. And recently, David and I had the good fortune of working on Puente, and we were able to actually not allow the building of a new fossil-powered gas-powered plant and replace that power plant with preferred resources such as storage and microgrids and renewables and solar in that area. So that was a big success for us, and it was good. We can do the same with Diablo. Diablo is just system power. It's not in a load pocket. It's not something that we need for reliability services. It's just low-cost power that happens to be generating right now. And, we haven't had a tsunami or an earthquake or anything else because it's on 3-fault line, so we're lucky so far. But if it goes offline tomorrow, it won't be as serious a concern as any of the others, as any of Diablo Canyon.
Okay, thank you. There's a woman on the edge there.
Yeah, and let me see if I can just try to answer.
sorry.
So,
Go ahead, Nancy.
so two things. One, I think about sort of we are the only utility. Large utility in California that still offers us an actual solar incentive payment separate from net metering. So I think question about whether anyway, so we have a solar incentive payment. Other utilities have just pure net metering programs. The second thing is that the answer to your question can be found on our website or by calling our very friendly customer service representatives at 1-800-DIAL-DWP, and they can answer all your questions. But we have about 250 megawatts of distributed solar here in Los Angeles. We are a top 5 solar city. Can we do more? Sure we can, and that's why community solar is so important. That's why the feed-in tariff is so important, and that's why the transition from a solar incentive program to a net metering program is going to be very important.
And zero net energy will help too.
And zero net energy will help too, and making our buildings more efficient. And thank you for what you're doing, and help us get the word out about solar programs. And and if you don't get an answer you like, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
I'm horrified to hear about the Palo Verde use of that amount of water per minute, because it speaks to my question, which is not about power, but it is environmental. It's the W part of DWP. Can you please explain what happened in Cape Town, and is it possible for the same thing to happen here?
So, well, thank you for the question. I mean, water obviously is, central to our life here in Southern California. Angelinos deserve huge credit. We use less water today than we used in 1990, and our population here in the city has grown by more than 1 million people. We have one of the lowest gallons per capita per day use of any major city. I think we're the lowest of any city over 1 million people, and that's all due to all of you. And the things that people do every day to help conserve water. Well, absolutely, and people have learned, what to do during a drought, and that's and what to maintain even in wet years. So when we think about the future and how do we avoid being in the same situation that Cape Town is in, it's a multi-part strategy. One, obviously, conservation, reducing our water use is number one. And we have lots of programs to help Angelinos save water. The second is to reduce our reliance on imported water and to grow our local water resources, to do more water recycling, to capture more stormwater when it does rain, to capture more of that before it goes out to the ocean for local use. And then the final thing is to clean up the industrial contamination in our groundwater basins in Los Angeles that limits the use of those groundwater basins for storing captured stormwater, for storing recycled water, and for helping us manage through a drought. And so we are pushing forward on all of those. The mayor set a goal, conservation goals, which we've already beaten, goals to reduce our reliance on imported water by 50% and to get 50% of our water from local sources by the middle of the next decade. Those are incredibly important, and we always need to keep water
and how we approach water in the front of our minds, and think about it every day. And thank you to every Angelina who has helped us weather the last drought and will help us weather the next droughts to come.
And that's an energy question as well, because if we think about as we get more local water and we're reclaiming the water, and we're looking at the challenge of less water available, even from outside resources, and that's becomes an energy question. So that's why we have to push forward towards clean energy. And some of the projections that we've made in our study, we're looking at 5% of our energy could come from water. Actually, that may increase. If drought conditions become worse and worse, then that's going to put some more requirement on the energy grid to supply that water through these various means. And I think that what we're looking at, or what we found, I should say, is that there are a lot of ways to do that. And the good news is if we take advantage of our solar resources in Southern California and our other resources throughout California, and we just use clean energy, then we can at least locally solve a lot of those water problems.
Yeah,
Yes,
we've
and
actually
just-
looked at, sorry, can I just add one thing? We've actually looked at the energy intensity of our different sources of water and the greenhouse gas intensity, and actually imported water. So when we import water from through the Delta, it has to get pumped over the Tehachapi Mountains. If we get water from the Colorado River, it gets lifted 7 times between the Colorado River and the LA basin. So when we looked at the energy intensity of different sources of water, actually the imported water was worse from an energy intensity perspective than recycled water or capturing stormwater or actually our own aqueduct.
Right.
Sorry.
And I just wanted to very quickly congratulate UCLA for doing the Sustainable LA Challenge and taking water into account, where water independence is critical, because building on what Nancy said, 30% of the state's energy resources are used to move water around. So we use a lot of pumps to move water around, and let me tell you, those pumps are not the most efficient ones, and they don't operate on a time of use basis where you want them cycling off when you've got a constraint on the grid. So coordinating between the water and energy nexus is key.
Okay, we had a question right here in front.
Thank you very, very much. Jerry Rubin, Santa Monica activist. Two-parter. What's the ramifications of Trump's threat, proposal to eliminate solar subsidies? And the second part is, what is everybody doing, including businesses, including every company, everyone, to oppose the proposed offshore oil drilling in Santa Monica? And I think we could simultaneously talk about the need for solar while getting out to oppose these crazy policies. So what are people doing, or what can you encourage people to do?
I can take a crack at the first. Hard to stay a moderator. I feel very strongly about this. It is completely arbitrary that we're doing this on solar, right? Everybody here, raise your hand if you own a cell phone, okay? It's everybody. Nobody has a cell phone that's made in America, okay? There's not a single cell phone manufacturing facility in the United States. We're not talking about slapping a 30% tariff on imported cell phones. This is a very deliberate and specific tariff, and it has already had a huge negative effect even before it went into effect, because for the last 6 months the industry knew it was coming, and the prices spiked, and we've lost almost 20% of the solar workforce in California. So we had 100,000 solar industry employees last year, and folks are getting laid off. And there's massive layoffs announced by SunPower and others. It is going to set back the clock temporarily. Long term, the prices are still going to go down, but it definitely slows us from where we need to go. But I don't know if others had comments on that or the second part of this
The only thing I
question.
would say, I mean, I will agree with everything that David said, but I guess what I'd also say is, we're committed to our renewable energy goals. We're committed to expanding local solar here in Los Angeles. We're committed to pushing ahead on renewables. We hope that Washington comes to its senses at some point, and I think you're right. That the projections, the long-term projections, are that solar energy is going to only get cheaper and cheaper, and storage will get cheaper and cheaper.
And then on the offshore drilling, I will refrain from providing my personal opinion. It would mostly be me making a face like, but I do think, we have a solution to our oil dependency, and that is electric vehicles. If we want to drive around Los Angeles, we can drive around in electric vehicles. LADWP offers a $500 rebate for a charger for home, and a $4,000 rebate for chargers in commercial buildings. Thanks to some assistance from the Energy Commission, we've been able to install electric vehicle chargers in a number of city facilities, at libraries and police stations, at the zoo and other places. The chargers at the LA Zoo are the most used chargers in California. So people come off the 5, they go and charge their car, they go see the animals, wave, and then I think the long-term answer is we need to, the answer to oil dependency is to not need it anymore, and we can help do that.
Very quickly on the solar part, I've been talking to the people. Most of the large contractors, it will affect the larger projects, already pre-purchased the solar panels, and that's why the price spiked and went up. So they've got supplies for the next year or so. With regards to residential, I think we should have more policy, accelerate the zero net energy, because the solar panel is just a small fraction, less than 10% of the total cost of installing a residential system on a roof. So it's not going to be such a huge impact on the residential market. And we need to transition faster into the distributed system, into the low-income communities, into the equitable transition, and make sure that everybody has access to solar energy and a distributed grid that makes all of us more safe and resilient.
Okay, question there in the back. Oh, sorry, this right here. Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on hydrogen-powered cars and the feasibility in creating an infrastructure in California, and perhaps what we're not seeing that the Japanese are seeing with that market.
Who'd like to take that?
I'll take it. I've been wanting to drive a Mirai for the longest time. Everybody tells me it's a great car and that there's enough fueling stations. I'm a firm believer in hydrogen. Hydrogen not only as a fuel, hydrogen as a storage source, and hydrogen as being able to be a generation source as well. So if we're in a reality where we've got an overgeneration of renewables and we've got excess power that we don't know what to do with, and as a matter of fact, we're curtailing or paying other people to take, then hydrogen starts to look very attractive. And I'm a fan of renewable hydrogen. If it's hydrogen that's made with solar power, solar hydrogen, then why not use that in fuel cars that run, fuel cell cars that are also electric? So hydrogen cars are electric. There's certainly a place for them in the transportation system. And from what I'm hearing from the gas company and others, fueling stations shouldn't be a big issue for hydrogen as well. And those cars, we're going to see more and more of them starting in 2030, 40, and 50. And I think they'll start playing a much more prominent role than we think.
Well, nothing against hydrogen, but just in terms of the infrastructure, think about it. Every in a major city like Los Angeles, pretty much every street already has electricity. So you have a street light. So, for example, one thing that the city of LA is doing is putting electric vehicle chargers on street lights, at parking meters. We're doing it on power poles. It's entirely possible in the long term that hydrogen infrastructure will be as commonplace as gas stations or electric vehicle chargers. But at least for the time being, some of those infrastructure challenges are easier to overcome with electric vehicles because pretty much electricity is ubiquitous in our city. There are about close to 1,500 electric vehicle chargers already in the city of Los Angeles, and more to come. So I don't think that any one technology is going to dominate the market, but it is true that electric infrastructure is already everywhere.
Batteries will dominate the market for the foreseeable future. I think hydrogen, if again we see more fueling stations or it becomes more ubiquitous and we solve some of the issues with charging available and ready, it's 10 years out or more.
We have to end promptly at 9, so we have time for maybe one more question. You had a question here, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Aki. I'm from Japan. I can remember our country have a nuclear problem. Yes, I can remember also your country in USA help our country project Tomodachi. Yes, this is very thank you for this problem. And I have one question. There is very a lot of people here, but I can't imagine in my country in Japan. So I have one question. Why American citizen, especially in California, a lot of people have very concerned about environment program. Yes, this is why I can't imagine in my country.
I think the question was, why is there such a strong environmental ethic in California? Why is clean air and clean water such a priority here?
Yes.
Well, I think it's in the memories of many people in this room when LA, which still has the worst smog problem in the country, when people had to stay home, couldn't send their kids outside, and really as a result of a lot of effort by Californians and by state and local government, our smog problem is light years better than it was not that long ago. And I think to the question about offshore drilling, it's in a lot of people's memories of oil spills in Santa Barbara, and actually not that long ago when we had a pipeline burst. So I think it's a couple of things. And Californians, we live in this incredibly beautiful place, and we want to be able to enjoy a high quality of life. I think the other thing is that with our tradition of innovation, we've really been able to apply that innovation towards addressing these environmental challenges and can really see the benefit. And so if you look at the growth in the economy in Southern California over the last 40 years versus what happened with air pollution, it totally blows up the canard that you can't have a clean environment and a healthy economy at the same time.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Will you please join me in thanking our panelists? Okay. I got to catch that flight, but thank you so much.